My name is Magda, and I'm the CEO of Coacharia. And today we have a webinar on what is coaching and how do you become a coach. We thought that would be helpful for anyone who's thinking about becoming a coach in the future, whether it's business coaching or life coaching. The stories that you hear today hopefully will apply to you as well. And today on our panel, we have 3 other members of the Coacharia community. And I'll go as I see them on my screen. So we have Karen, who's joining us from the US. And Karen is an experienced coach as well as a trainer who is currently running our virtual programs and runs virtual programs for Coacharia in general. Then we have Ram, who's joining us from India. And Ram is the founder of Coacharia, as well as a trainer of the MCC program. He also holds monthly webinars for all learners. So for anyone who does join us as a learner in the future, you'll get to see Ram's face a few times a month in our webinars. And then we have Shyam, who, like Karen, is a coach and a trainer in our virtual programs. Both Karen and Shyam run programs that apply to the time zones where our attendees are coming from, which is why we have them on the panel today, so that you can get to know us a little bit, as well as learn about coaching. So it looks like we have some people already here, which is great. So I think we'll just jump in and we'll go, maybe start with Ram. We'll talk about, what is coaching? What does it mean to you? And maybe think about a little bit about the journey that you took as a coach. Tell our panelists and our attendees a little bit about, how you got into the profession.
You want me to start, Magda?
Oh, yes, please, Ram. Sorry, I unmuted you.
Yeah, okay, thanks. 2 parts to it. My own coaching journey is not necessarily the pathway that I would recommend to everybody. Mine is pretty accidental. But they were choices. I had been a corporate executive most of my life, corporate leader. And I had also gone through a part of my life in a spiritual journey. And I was at crossroads at a fairly late stage in my life, at which point in time someone suggested coaching to me. And I looked at various options and decided that if at all I'm going to train myself at that age to something meaningful, it had to be of sufficient gravitas in a sense. And so I looked around and found International Coaching Federation, and I then enrolled in a program. And subsequently, I went through several other credentials with the European Mentoring Coaching Council and the Center for Credentialing Education and others. So it has given a much larger overview in terms of what coaching as an intervention, a personal development, as well as an organizational development intervention it can be. Coming to what coaching means to me, very, very specifically and very simply put, let's look at it this way. If a paying client comes to you as a coach, the reason is that the client is unable to solve a personal problem. The client has a desire, an outcome, and there are some challenges in terms of reaching that outcome. If those challenges, as well as the solution to those challenges, are so simple and obvious, and they are available to the conscious mind of that person would not be needing a coach. They would be able to resolve it themselves, or they would be able to go to another person who's a friend and family or a mentor or someone who would be able to resolve it. Very often, our barriers are internally created, and we can go into much greater detail. That will be far longer than the time allowed in this particular webinar. And it's this internal barrier, which is unconscious most of the time, which stops us from realizing what we can do to reach where we want to go. And a coach's job is primarily that. All the coaching competencies are in terms of addressing these internal barriers, what we normally call in coaching parlance, a cliche is limiting beliefs, and the whole process is around that. So that is what, in a simple sense, that a coach does. Very often, we tend to think that the coach is out there for a solution. When I started my coaching journey, the person who recommended coaching to me all said, oh, you've been a troubleshooter all your life, you've been a corporate leader, you've been a doer. And so it'd be very easy for you to provide solutions to people. And that's not coaching. That's at best mentoring. That's not even good mentoring. How we create awareness in someone as to what is it that is internally blocking them and helping them to find a way to move forward is really what coaching is about. Thank you.
Karen, do you want to talk about the same thing? What is coaching to you, and how did you get into this profession?
Yes, much like Ram, I worked in corporate America and often worked with leaders who were responsible for great initiatives. And part of my role, I was actually in human resources at a senior level. And in addition to helping them with their organization, I found myself coaching them. And it was a myriad of things. I want to get from here to there. It could be introducing a product or service. It could be making a process more efficient. It could be expanding an organization. And often I found that in addition to helping them from a human resource standpoint, I also was coaching them on the either limiting beliefs, as Ram had outlined, or just gaining clarity on a path forward. I didn't always have the luxury to exclusively coach, but I knew for me that I found just as much benefit in providing the coaching as the leader was receiving it. So it is in many respects partly spiritual, or getting to the core and essence of your being, as well as being of service to others. And so it was something that I found very rewarding.
Wonderful. Shyam?
Hi all. Yeah, with my experience of corporate, I did realize this one thing which I would like to quote one of the best things about coaching, Bob. He says that I absolutely believe that people, unless coach, never reach their maximum capabilities. And that was true in my case when 20 years ago, when I was launched by New York Life, the topmost agent who came to India and mentioned us as to how to create a corporate coaching culture and how to use the potential of each and every one. And that was the aspect which I actually explored on in my career. And then I realized that this is my cup of tea and I need to go wholesale into this and say that why not do coaching when I want, where I want, and to whom I want, rather than specifically waiting for a person who is only reporting to me. So I did explore this aspect of coaching my peer group, my bosses, for example. So including a superior from my organization whom actually we got involved and did some coaching programs. And then I realized that why not be on my own? So I can always say this as a coach for me, I would say that I would like to be a true human being in its true sense, that is being as such. So move from helpful to being useful. Being helpful is almost more of mentoring and counseling or consulting or helping them out. But when you're actually being useful, you actually use their potential to the maximum levels. And that's the reason I feel that I'm so happy and proud to be associated in this world today as a coach. Thanks, Mike.
I really like that, moving to being useful. I think we can all use a bit of that in our lives. I know the three of you and you're very different people. So clearly there's no cookie cutter as to who will make a great coach. But are there characteristics you think, or attributes or innate skills, whatever you want to call it, that make for a really good coach? Can you talk about that a little bit? And please jump in whoever wants.
Yeah, so I'll start this off. I'm sure Ram and Shivam have things that they want to add. But I think one of the principal characteristics is being a good and attentive listener. Because as a coach, one of the things that you really have to do well is hear what the client is saying. And it's not just what they're saying verbally, but it's also what I call between the lines. So often the most powerful usefulness, I love what he was saying about usefulness, is to read what's between the lines and what's not said. Because as a coach, you are using all of your senses, and you're listening to what people are explaining, you're watching their body language, you are seeing, the shifts in their energy, and you're trying to read all of that and listen to all of that and interpret what that means. And so, a good coaching session is when I am observing what's not being said and then bringing that up and seeing if there's something there that creates awareness in the individual. Usually that there is awareness there, but the client thinks, oh, I've hidden that. That's kind of masked. I didn't know that you were so perceptive. But as a good coach really uses those perceptions to help the client uncover whatever it is that they're thinking, feeling, even trying to hide.
Yeah, I'd like to add here a few things. A great coach, according to me, a few things which comes up is being non-judgmental and empathic listening. Added to this is, I seriously feel that we need to believe in the process of coaching and the benefits it can actually attain for the client, especially because the whole conversation is about the client, and we work on the client at the end of the day as to what is it they want from that session. So if you would like to be a great coach, the first thing is you also need to believe in the process of a coaching. And if you have a coach, it's great. I have a coach. And I believe in this process that in the last 15 years, I have a coach. So I'm sincerely to tell you that until unless it's having a balanced approach and a realistic approach, a coach can never help the client to reach whatever they would like to achieve. That's how I would like to conclude on this.
I liked what Sham said about moving from being helpful to being useful. I would just add two adjectives to it: moving from sympathetically being helpful to empathetically being useful. One of the greatest gurus of coaching, to my mind, is Carl Rogers. And from his humanistic, client-centered approach, he articulated a 3-point coaching framework, as it were. The one is about what he calls unconditional positive regard for the client. And the second is congruence with what the client wants to achieve. And the third is about empathy, putting yourself in client's shoes. And other famous gurus of coaching, John Whitmore, Timothy Galway, and these people said, coaching is about enhancing one's performance to potential. And there is also a definition of Otto Scharmer in his Theory U of what is called a generative listening, where he says the listening that as a coach you should employ is not merely putting yourself in the shoes of the client as the client is, but as to what the client can become, what is the future potential of that client. At that point in time, if you're able to visualize what is it that can take the client, help the client grow upwards, that is truly the contribution that a good coach can make. And whatever Karen and Sham said, absolutely, being completely non-judgmental, being disengaged, being detached, but at the same time, very powerfully empathetic and being listening, and what we call in coaching as a presence, which is partnering. These are the highest levels. And there are many other competencies in terms of how do you listen, how do you ask. Very often, What does not make a good coach is what people think what a coach should be, asking whatever is termed as, within quotes, powerful questions, which to me, the most useless competency, because then people mug up 20 questions, 50 questions, which appear on Google, which are posted there by very helpful coaches, so-called master coaches, which are totally irrelevant, because you can never ask a powerful question unless it stems from what the client is saying at that point in time, spontaneously and curiously and evocative. And you can never muck them up and keep those 20 questions in your mind, or as one master coach I have seen demonstrate, selling a packet of questions. Oh, you should keep this, and in this particular session, you should decide to ask this question. I don't want any other coaches we train to become anything like that. You need to be a very powerful listener. You need to be a powerful, empathetic, respectful, and equal listener, not someone the client looks up to, but the client looks across and being able to communicate, very clearly defining what we need to achieve in a particular session and moving towards that, establishing a very comfortable level of interaction in terms of trust and confidence and presence. And these would make excellent coaches. And what Karen said, I completely endorse. It's a spiritual journey. At the end of it, most people who I find today at the mastery level are people who deeply believe in the greatness of other people and in the way that how we can interact, commune with people. Coaching is not about it's not a conversation, certainly. It's much beyond a communication, even a purposeful communication. It's a communion. It's almost as if you are working at an energetic level with another person. Thank you.
So, Ram, you touched on a few things there that are quite interesting. So all these different things, the attributes that we talked about, some of them are, already there for you. So you could be starting out your coaching journey and be quite empathetic already and non-judgmental and a great listener. But part of the journey of becoming a coach is the training bit, which is what we do at Coacharia. So you can hone those skills. So maybe let's kind of jump into that, what that journey entails. So, everyone who's going to be watching this video later or who's attending the webinar today is clearly thinking about potentially becoming a coach. Perhaps already is a coach in some capacity. But what are the kind of practical steps, maybe from, even just realizing, maybe coaching is for me? What are the practical steps that people have to take or should take in order to go from, regular daytime job to becoming a coach in the future?
Yeah. As someone said to me, that everyone can be a healer, the same way I think everyone can be a coach. It's just the way that you want to serve other people. I think that the most important aptitude that one requires and the passion that one requires is that coaching is a vocation. In a sense, though, what Shyam said was right. It's not about helping people, but it's a nurturing vocation, and you have to be fully prepared that this is what you're looking for. It's not about your own personal aggrandizement, but it's about helping other people grow. I think that's the simplest way of determining whether one is suitable to be a coach. So it doesn't matter what age you are, what experience you have. In fact, people with probably less experience have less to unlearn. People with large amount of corporate experience have a lot more to unlearn in terms of being judgmental, in terms of being telling rather than asking, as it were, those kind of things. But the process of training, the way that we look at it, and this we have refined over the years, and this is not what we were about 10 years ago when we started. And today, we are at the moment, we have already trained about 50% of, or more than 50% of the master coaches in India. And we are now embarking on a program where we would like to become at one point in time the trainer of the largest number of master coaches in the world, not only just for ICF, but for EMCC as well. We already have 2 of us as master practitioners with EMCC, and there are more on the way. So we start with the assumption that everybody who has what they believe it takes to be a coach in terms of being nurturing, helpful, are capable of moving towards mastery. And what it entails right from the beginning is to believe that what is important is to listen, as Karen and Sham said, to have that presence, and not be solution giving. We give solutions which are based on our DNA. It doesn't work for someone else whose DNA is different from ours. So all that you can do is to create an awareness in a person. So what we work on, right from the word go, as it were, from our first classes onwards, all our trainers do, Karen, Sham, and many other people, is how do you address what is going on within the mind of the client rather than what is going on in the external world. I think that is most critical. And that is, to us, is the fundamental principle of how we can train people to mastery. And we believe, irrespective of what credential they are looking for, whether they are looking for a basic associate or the mid-level professional or later to become a master coach, they would have the foundation which would eventually take them there. So that is an extremely serious belief that we have. And how we do it as an approach, we'll come back. I'll answer the questions by Martha later. But also, parallelly, we believe that it's very important that coaching not be limited to just what is defined by ICF, EMCC, and so on. That coaching is a part of a larger framework of interventions which can help people individually and collectively as organizations. So many of these are psychological, neuro-linguistic programming, positive psychology, all based on Jungian psychology, appreciative inquiry, transactional analysis, and several other things, which are all extremely powerful. And they all have elements of what we call reframing, changing the way that our mind works. The mind maps are changed. And therefore, these are extremely powerful interventions. So we teach them as well to introduce you to those. And many of our learners have gone beyond to become experts in that, far greater experts than what some of us as trainers are. And we also in parallel work with multiple credentials, not just the ICF, but also European Mentoring Coaching Council, as well as Center for Credentialing Education. So anybody who completes our program has a possibility of qualifying not just for one, but three. And it has tremendous advantages, especially if you're looking at the world as your oyster, as it were, in terms of going beyond the borders of wherever you are. So these are some of the things that we structure in terms of our approach. Thanks.
So let's just clarify one thing. So you talked about kind of making a decision to become a coach, and we talked about, the kind of person that tends to want to go into coaching, and then we kind of jumped into training as a coach. Do a lot of coaches follow that kind of linear path where they go from, is this something that's right for me, and train, get their credential from ICF, EMCC, CCE, whatever, and then, build their coaching practice? Or do you find that people kind of get into coaching, do it for a while, and then become credentialed? Is there a pattern there? Or Karen, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I would say that there are a variety of ways that people become a coach. And I do think there are people who coach in their career, and they may not even be aware that they're doing it. I mean, coaching, the word coaching in the industry of coaching is still relatively new. The people who have done it for 30 years were there before it was even, a thing. And I found that I was coaching, but I really wasn't aware of it. It was part of the kind of linear skills that I brought. I could consult, I could facilitate, I could coach, I could train. And it was later that I understood that I was coaching. And particularly when you're internal in a company, you may not feel the need to get credentialed. But what happens is, if you love it, which is what I did, I really wanted to be credentialed because there was so much more I could learn about all the things that Ram was talking about, appreciative inquiry and positive psychology and learning about different assessments and other interventions that are often used when you're working with organizations to bring about change, to create something, to reshape something. So it's, if that's your leaning, it's really a focus on learning. You're learning one about, how to be a better coach, but also how to be a better professional. And so the ICF gives you competencies, and most people who are working in companies today, all companies usually have some form of competencies, ways to behave, to get the job done. So the ICF is no different, and like the European Mentoring Council is no different either. They all have their own competencies. So it's helpful to understand what those are and really align yourself to be a better coach by understanding those competencies and really elevating your game, because that's what credentialing is really all about. It may start off as something natural that you enjoy, that people who you work with enjoy getting from you, but you could be so much stronger if you understood what the competencies are and how to really align yourself with those competencies.
So for those of you who maybe don't know the acronyms that we're throwing a little bit around, I know you guys, Karen and Ram, just both defined them, but there are multiple bodies on our planet that accredit coaches or give credentials to coaches, towards which we as Coacharia train. But if you want to learn more about those, there's links on our website, or you can ping us afterwards and I'll happily send you links so you can learn more about all the acronyms, because there's quite a few of them. But, as you said, you can be coaching in your role and not even realize it, or maybe you do realize it and you still don't have the credential. And, this isn't like medical doctors, for example, where you have to be credentialed to coach. But there is value beyond just the fact that you're going to learn a lot and be a better coach as a result of going through a training program and then getting credentialed. Do any of you just, working with corporate clients, do you see a demand for being a credentialed coach? And in addition to that, do you see other benefits other than just, I'm going to learn a lot and be a better coach for credentialing? Is there a higher purpose to that? Ram, I know you're a big proponent of credentialing. Do you want to comment on the usefulness and need for credentialing?
Okay. At the very first level, I don't think that credential is the only way to become a coach. You can be a very good coach without being credentialed. Like what Karen just now said, there are many people who in their work life, they don't just mentor by giving solutions, but they also help people to explore, and they work in a coaching format. So what a coaching training program does, especially what any kind of credentialing program does, is really the same way as any learning does. The 3 R's, for example, the same way we have the 11 competencies of ICF and 8 competencies of EMCC and 6 of BCC and so on. And so you build around that framework and you understand what those rules and competency frameworks are. And eventually, once you have gotten familiar with them, they become sort of subconscious competencies within us, unconscious competencies within us. And we are able to perform without the need for referring back to them every time. Having said that, more and more, when I started, let me go back to the Indian situation, which I'm far more familiar, and it's not very different from Europe and US if you just go back in time a little bit more. It was just that the process started maybe 25 years ago or 30 years ago in the US and UK, and it started about maybe 8-9 years ago in India. I was the third professionally trained coach, International Coaching Federation certified coach in India. And I had a very difficult time in terms of convincing companies that they need to look for credential coaches. In fact, one of them asked me, if there are only 3 of you in this country who are professional credential coaches, does it mean that all of us in the companies we want to hire coaches, we have to come to only 3 of you? Is that what you're saying? And that is when I really got seriously interested in training people, because I realized that was a very, very important question. You had to really create a critical mass of coaches to be able to do that. So ICF at that time, if I remember, International Coaching Federation had probably less than 10,000 people. This was roughly about 9-10 years ago as credential coaches. And today we have about 25,000 plus. In India, there were about 20-30 maximum associate and professional coaches. Today we have something like about 650 to maybe 700, and out of whom about 75% Coach Arya has trained and credentialed. So what has happened is, over a period of time, with the greater availability of people who are out there, who are professionally trained and who follow a framework, like everywhere else, corporate bodies do not want to make mistakes. They do not want to learn by making mistakes. So they would prefer, just like, for example, if you're looking for a business graduate, you would first look at the Harvards and Stanfords or whoever at that point in time rated the highest. They're also looking for whichever is the best credentialing body in the world that they know and what those best credentials are. So pretty much, I think in most countries today, for many corporates, the ICF's, International Coaching Federation's PCC qualification has become pretty much the norm for coaching senior executives. They may go down with lower qualification for other people. So I think purely from a point of view of marketing yourself, that label has become important, just the way that any other label in terms of a degree has become important. So some might call it necessary evil, but I think that is part of the learning that one goes through and be able to do that. So yes, I'm a great proponent of credentials for 2 reasons. One, I think it certainly gives you a framework to learn and work from. Otherwise, we all make mistakes. Now we get a standard format in which to work from. And I think the basic purpose of all learning is that, moving from unconscious incompetence to unconscious competence, as it were. And secondly, I think there's a marketing need that you need to fulfill through these credentials. Yeah.
So at what point do learners choose which credential to pursue? Do you recommend that people do their research on the different credentials before they start training? Or is that something that they can kind of figure out as they go along?
Well, typically what we tell people is that if you have about 15 years of experience, then you should certainly go for a professional coaching certification, PCC at ICF level and equivalent. You have what it takes to be able to get there. Less than 10 years, I would say that, yes, start with ACC, find what your aspirations are, what your resonance for the coaching process is, and so on, and then take it forward from there. So between 10 and 15, it really depends. We go into a little more detail to understand what their passion is and so on and so forth. So we spend a lot of time. In fact, you know that I with pretty much most leads who come to me to talk to them, I spend a lot of time in terms of trying to figure out what is it that they want to do in life. So it's a mini coaching exercise to determine how they want to become a coach as well. So, but yeah, very typically, if you have some amount of industry experience, I would look at PCC credential as what is the minimum today.
I'd like to just build on that. I think in the US, there is increasingly the request for certified coaches. And Ram explained the evolution of the ICF. And I think there are more companies that value coaching. They want their leaders to understand the fundamentals of coaching so that they can lead their staff that way. In some respects, coaching is replacing or is added in to the performance conversation. So that instead of having a performance conversation that's annual once a year, there is coaching that's infused more regularly, so that as people are performing their role, they know what they're doing well, They know where they need to course correct and reframe. And the leader is expected to coach on a more regular basis. So there's that need that is, I would say really, it started probably about 7 or 8 years ago, and I think it's more embedded into organizations. So that's part of the drive for it. I would say that the other drive is that organizations are realizing that, you know, coaching has benefits, and there is a return on investment for when you're coaching individuals. So you're not coaching someone who's in a performance crisis and you're trying to, you know, quote, save them. But coaching is seen as an investment for high potentials, individuals who the company has already deemed has the ability to grow, you know, not just one level, but maybe 2 or 3 levels above. And they want to invest in that individual to help them accelerate their career. So in the US, I think that, you know, coaching has taken on a greater significance because there is recognition that, you know, there's a return on coaching, and it shouldn't be just for employees who are in crisis, which I think was not all companies, but some companies saw, you know, getting you a coach as that. And so it has really shifted to a more positive or neutral or accelerator in one's.
So we've been quite focused on coaching employees. We just talked about coaching leaders, but you know, quite a few people come to us asking about life coaching, and it's a controversial topic sometimes. You know, business coaching versus life coaching, are they one? Are they the same? But in terms of training, you know, being a coach is being a coach is being a coach. You still have the same kinds of skills you're going to utilize, regardless of what kind of coaching you go into. But I'm just curious if any of you want to comment on, you know, the sort of journey one might take towards becoming a life coach versus a business coach. Are they quite different? Are there, you know, forks in the road that you take when you train to be one kind or the other? Anyone? Shyam, you look keen to speak.
Yeah, I would just like to add here a few things. Coaching is all about trying to get the best out of you. Now, even if it's done in live coaching to understand your work-life balance, or business coaching as to develop on certain strengths of yours, or to identify a few areas which you need to work upon, everything is the same at the end of the day. I need to address you as a coachee. So if you come across as a person that I need some help, but I can't look into my own self because I need some extra validation. So a coach helps the person to dig deep into that person to understand how the person views their world. Now, that in itself is such a significant thing that the person start realizing, and the realization itself will come out with some more action plans which they would like to work upon. So whether it is life coaching or business coaching, at the end of the day, the person needs to see how they are seeing their world. And that would help them in this terms of overall competency, which we provide in terms of Kocharia's East and West blending. So I have seen this happening to myself when I approached Ram, 4 years ago, and then in 3 years ago or 2 years ago when I completed it, I noticed that just by practicing coaching so much in depth has made me such a professional right now, which is helping me both in terms of being an executive coach and being a transformational person for myself, my family, and my people around me.
That's actually a great segue into my next question. I did want to go into training a little bit more. Again, we do training as a company, as a primary purpose for this webinar. But this is training as a coach. There's particular competencies you cover across the board because they are required in order to be an accredited program. You have to cover certain topics. So what I wanted to maybe talk about next is what kinds of things you can expect to learn in a coach training program, and then what are the other components? I mean, Shyam just mentioned there's you practice coaching. So there's peer coaching as part of the training program. Could one of you kind of go through practicalities of the sorts of things you would learn?
Yeah, in what we're offering in Coacharia is really reviewing in a modular format all aspects of credentials. And I think that that is unique. And what I mean by that is not all coaching programs focus on the European Mentoring Coaching Council or the board certified coach. Most are focused on the ICF competencies, which there are 11 of them. And the competencies have a certain blend, among the different accreditations. But what Coacharia does is really focus on all three. And I think that's a unique proposition, so that as you look at your opportunities in a coach situation, particularly if you work for a large organization and your workforce or your colleagues are across the globe, it's helpful to know that not only are you ICF certified, which is the International Coach Federation, but there are other credentialing organizations that you can be a part of, and that you can be aware of those competencies and how they blend in and overlap. So I think that's part of it. But certainly you're learning about the competencies. There are 11, as Ram said earlier, with the ICF. And those include, having ethics, number one, understanding confidentiality, understanding how to create awareness with the client, how to have presence as a coach. And Ram talked about that. That's how you partner with the coach. Helping to, go deeper in terms of what it is that the client wants to address. What is their concern? It may not be an issue. It may be more of a dilemma on, how do I go either this way or that? But, helping to uncover that. And then really trying to help design with that client the outcome that they're looking for, and doing it in a way that is not telling, but really exploring, what are the things that you've tried? What are the barriers that you see? And, most importantly, what's the path that you want to create to achieve the goal that you're trying to achieve? And I'll let others add.
Yeah, Ram, I'd love to hear from you, actually. Karen talked about the competencies that are covered, but one of the main things that attract people to us, which I think is quite unique to Coacharia, is the Eastern approaches that we also teach, in addition to the Western ones that you mentioned in your previous answer. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, let me very, very quickly cover a couple of the points that both Shyam and Karen also addressed earlier. One is about what you refer to as the controversial, the differentiation between life coaching and what might be called executive coaching. Most coaches know that when they start coaching, very quickly they learn that all coaching is really life coaching. There is no such thing as so-called executive coaching, business coaching, and these are all towards a certain purpose that you want to achieve. But fundamentally, the skills that all of us trainers we teach and all the credentialing bodies address are about life coaching. How do you communicate? How do you establish what you need to agree with the client and so on? And they are applicable to various niches, be it executive coaching, what some people call leadership coaching, some people call business coaching. And today that is called wellness coaching, and good grief, there is grief coaching. So there are so many of them. And I guess it all depends on needs of individuals, and therefore, whatever you try and specialize in that becomes a coaching specialization. So, but fundamentally, I think the competencies address life coaching, which then can be applied to anything else. And like what Karen said, the ICF, all the credentials are very good in terms of their competencies. What I find is, for instance, European Mentoring Coaching Council, it focuses a lot more on the awareness of the coach, whereas ICF doesn't address that as much. It's about the awareness that is created in a coaching conversation. In EMCC, one of the first criterion actually in terms of competency is understanding self. That goes far deeper, and that also goes into the aspect that I'll come to in a minute in terms of the East-West. And in addition, EMCC looks at assessments and evaluations, so does Center for Credentialing Education in terms of BCC. So each one of them in its own way addresses these competencies differently. And we believe that putting them all together and helping people learn these different approaches is extremely important, as well as other organizational development criteria. So when we talk about the East and the West, and partly it arises from the fact that I've been the creator of the content for Coach Arya, and my own background has been, in a sense, pretty eclectic. I've been a corporate leader. I've been through fairly long and arduous spiritual journeys, and at this point in time, I'm a coach. So a lot of what I learned in terms of a spiritual journey, which was Hindu-Buddhist in principle, was about the whole aspect of meditation, reflective practice, and those kind of things. And I find that they are extraordinarily important to coaching for 3 or 4 things. One is for creating awareness within oneself. And that is what Carl Rogers says is the most important thing, that unless a coach is aware, it is impossible to bring about any kind of awareness into the client. And along with that, you also learn to listen. The meditative practice allows you to become a much better listener. And you are comfortable with silence. You allow the other person to speak, and you are able to interpret, as Karen earlier said, not just the words, but what is not being said, whether it's facial, whether it's tonal variation, body language, all that kind of stuff. And then it also allows you to bring a certain amount of presence into the way that you communicate with people. So what we do is, it's not that we sort of force feed you any kind of Eastern meditative practices, but we weave it into our content in terms of exposing you to some of these practices, more in terms of self-reflection, more in terms of creating that inner awareness, which is extremely important for becoming a coach. And as Shyam said at a point in time, that becoming non-judgmental, that is really what makes you non-judgmental. So from that sense, we bring that together. And those who, so most trainers follow just the credentials in a very literal sense. The 11 competencies of ICF, or the 8 competencies of EMCC, or 6 of BCC, etc., are being addressed. And this is what we do. And then, then, okay, you have to pass your various tests and so on. We don't believe that. We believe that you need to go far deeper. So a part of our coaching program is about self-transformation, as Shyam said. It is about creating awareness. It's about a self-discovery. So we incorporate things which start from the Maslow's need hierarchy, the Graves model of evolution. It's about the hero's journey. It's about essentially how you understand what is the meaning and purpose, and what is it that would allow you then to be able to help other people reach their meaning and purpose. So in a sense, our East and West interactive combination is when I found that there was a tremendous congruence between what I learned from the Eastern philosophical approach to the Jungian psychological approach. If you want to see the differences, of course you can, but if you want to see the congruence, you can too. And so today we bring together Eastern philosophy, Western psychology, neurobiological research more and more, which talks about things which are in consonance with like mirror neurons and neuroplasticity and all these kind of things, which are pretty much in line with meditative practices. And also I'm particularly, I'm a student of quantum physics. So I find that there's a lot of it in like the whole principle of singularity, for example, appeals to me a lot. And that there's a tremendous amount of spiritual significance to it as well. So these are some of the things that we try to bring together, if nothing else, to create a curiosity within the learner. Hey, this is where you can take it forward. And many of them do. There are people I find today, even at the learning level, who are coming and making presentations about stuff that I didn't even know existed. Just a couple of weeks ago, I had this conversation with this guy. He's an American who's following a spiritual path in India, and he's also wanting to be a business person. And we had a conversation about going to the depths of some of these things. And in 1 hour, we couldn't really go very far, but it provided such a beautiful amalgam of what coaching can be and how interesting it can be. Thanks.
Thanks, Ram. Shyam, yes, please go.
Yeah, I'd just like to add one very critical point here, which Ram mentioned. The most critical aspect of today, everyone discusses about mindfulness, and there is something which is much more deeper than that, which is on mindlessness, which Ram has created. And it is so amazing. I have seen this, having several, benefits coming across to many of them, and understanding how actually mindlessness has contributed to overall the coaching aspect as such. So I would like to, Ram, to just, mention maybe on that part, because that would exactly mean on the East and West concept. Ram, if you'd like to.
Yeah, sure, Shyam. Okay, very simply it is this. In the Western philosophical framework or even psychological framework, for example, if you are a student of Freud and Jung and others, there are three states of awareness. The conscious state, subconscious state, and the unconscious state. In Eastern philosophy, there is a fourth state. These three states of conscious, which is the awake state in which, for example, we are interacting now, and the subconscious state, which could be like a trance or a dream state, and the deep unconscious state, which could be equivalent to sleep, they actually move into a fourth state, which is just called the fourth state in the Hindu scriptures. And that's all the word there is. And in in the Buddhist practice, this state is known as the no-mind state. And I deliberately coined this phrase called mindlessness just to make people unhappy. So there is a certain amount of controversy and people say, hey, you're crazy. I said, yeah, sure, I'm crazy, but I'm not any crazier than you are when you are trying to be mindful. Because the more you apply your senses to something, the more you are imprisoned into what you're doing. You're more imprisoned into what you are working within the world. You can't get out of it. You're like something like a guinea pig going round and round in one of those treadmills kind of a stuff. That's what mindfulness is about in really strict sense of the term. And everybody talks so highly about it. When I ask them, okay, what have you got out of it? Yeah, you put a raisin in your mouth and you try and taste it and so on and so forth. But the real freedom comes when you move out of your sensory objectivity into what is called, from the phenomenal world into the noumenal world, as it were. Something that cannot be sensed, and that is where the real energy comes. And that is what is called the no-mind state. That is what is called the fourth state. That is what is called the mindless state. To me, that is an important state of awareness that a coach needs to at least try and reach, because that is where you become detached from your own ego. You are non-judgmental, and you're able to look at it from a completely different perspective in terms of the potential of the client, rather than what like Shyam said, in terms of what you can help the other person, but just being there, how can you be useful? Yeah, I can go on and on it. Mindlessness is my favorite obsession. So I can take hours on it, but in very simple way, the mindless state is what Zen calls as a no mind. Any of you can Google, and that'll be very easy to find, or what is called the fourth state of awareness in the Hindu scriptures called the Upanishads.
If you actually go to coacharya.com/blog, there's a few articles that we have that Ram authored on mindlessness. So please check that out as well. I do want to wrap things up. So I just welcome, each of you to maybe give some advice to anyone who's thinking about becoming a coach. How how should they decide whether they should jump in and kind of what's next? Karen, do you want to start maybe?
Sure. I would say that if you are already coaching and you find fulfillment in it in terms of seeing your usefulness, using Shyam's word, I love, that concept, then definitely pursue becoming a credentialed coach. You will further your professionalism. You'll understand, even in a greater extent, how you can maximize yourself to be better as a coach and to be more useful to those around you.
Okay, I'd just like to add here one most important point here. Coaching is actually for all, not only for selected few, whether it's an organization in terms of an executive coaching or a business coaching, or is it not only for a life coaching aspect. It's for all. But many of them don't understand that what a coach can actually bring for them. So if you are the person who would like to bring out the best in others, like an MBA, like any of the PhDs or any other course which you would like to take up, coaching is one of the best things to happen for a leadership program. So if you would like to enhance your leadership skills, as well as bring out some good organization culture change in terms of coaching aspect, I think a credential would help you in terms of 2-3 aspects, as all of us covered on in terms of the competencies, as well as the practice, as well as the we connect with everyone across the world. The cohorts which we conduct, actually we offer many of them across the world will be there in the batch, and you learn a lot. So that would benefit you, and one more feather in the cap if you were to get credentialed. And what nothing like an ICF or EMCC or BCC.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Let me look at it this way. If I had probably a dollar for every time this question was asked by a person who wants to become a coach, I would probably pretty be close to $1 million, I guess. Is that what is the bottom line? What is the ROI? What is the return on investment? Coach training is not cheap. It is expensive. It is because of the way it is structured. It is individual. ICF does not allow you to just listen to a webinar on a recorded basis. It has to be in presence of people. And there's a classroom size that is limited. All this makes coaching expensive. So how am I going to get my investment back is really what is at the back of everybody who goes into this coach training that comes up. And I try to address it in 2 ways. One, that there is no easy way. Because what happens is most people who want to be coaches somehow turn out to be somewhat introverted. They are not necessarily extroverted, but they are also the kind of people who are very idealistic, and they do not want to promote themselves. And that doesn't work. If you're going to be a coach, if you want to be an entrepreneur in terms of promoting yourself as a coach, you need to be able to promote yourself. So what I'd suggest to them is don't promote yourself, but promote the profession. Promote, like what Shyam said, in terms of what coaching can do for you. And move from there into yourself. Yes, I am one of those coaches, and of course you can select other people, and this is what my differentiation is. And the second is use the social media to the extent that you can, because that is what your visiting card is. Today, printed name cards are of no use. It's your website, it's your blogs, it is your social media presence that is the most important. And the third is whatever kind of profession that you've had, try to leverage upon that, the kind of contacts that you've had in that profession. How do you go back? For example, I keep telling Shyam, he comes from the banking profession. So the banking financial sector is ripe. There's a tremendous amount of coaching work that goes on there. And then that kind of experience blends very well, because many people are looking for people who have had the experience, actually, who walk the talk. So all this, Bennett, is coming together. And today, the simple truth is, and which most trainers do not want to really tell you, that just as a coach, it's not going to be easy for many people to make a living. Yes, at a certain point in time when you've got the credibility and visibility, yes, you can. But you need to do other things besides. So coaching can be an excellent framework for training, for example. Group coaching and training is the direction in which things are going. Team coaching, for example. So there are many other applications to which coaching can be put. And if you put them all together, you can arrive at a much better sort of business plan that will allow you to become a profitable coach, not just a masterful coach or a highly credentialed coach. I think that is, to my mind, is going to be the most important as we go along in terms of helping people understand. So we spend a lot of time in our webinars discussing these issues. How do you develop your business? What is it that you need to do to be able to promote yourself? So it is not just about the competencies. There is, though 80% of what we train in the classes has to be competency based because of the regulations, but we do a lot of it offline, working with people in terms of trying to take them forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Ram, and thank you to all our panelists. Thank you, Shyam and Karen. This was super useful. I hope that everyone who's attended learned something new about coaching and hopefully came off a little bit inspired to perhaps jump in and become a coach. If anyone on this chat, on this webinar would like a recording, please email me. I will happily send you the link later, and you can share this recording with anyone else you know who's thinking about coaching or is already coaching as part of their job. All right, well, thank you so much. Everyone, we have other events coming up in the future. Please check them out at coacharia.com/events. There's at least one monthly webinar that's public. In addition to that, there's several others that we do on an ad hoc basis and for our learners. So we hope to see you at a future webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Magda. Thanks, all the participants. Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Shyam.
Yes, thank you.
All the best in our journey.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.